All right, everybody's coming in. Thank you all for your patience.
Hello?
Hi, Judge.
This is Howard Redner. I was muted and I tried to unmute. Did it work?
Well, you're unmuted. We
Okay.
need you to mute.
My camera's broken, but my audio works.
Okay, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. I am just going to make a few housekeeping notes. Everyone that's in attendance has received a sign out verification form. Ayesha will be sharing 2 codes throughout the meeting. We ask that when you are completing your form that you put your codes directly on there. Regarding being here today on behalf of the bar, we are all very grateful and happy that you are able to join us via Zoom. Please remember to keep yourself muted. We're only asking participants that are speaking on our panel today to be unmuted. So for all of you that are participating, please remain on mute. We're also asking that all of you that are not participating, you turn off your video. And the reason being is because it will affect how you view the program. Anyone has any questions that they would like asked throughout the program, please send them to me privately through chat and we will make sure that they are asked anonymously. And from here, I'm going to turn it over to Judge Jacobson first, and we will get things going from there. Thank you all.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the somewhat delayed, annual Mercer County Bar Association Ethics Lunch. I want to thank President James Cregan and Executive Director Samantha Iraka for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today. President Cregan made the theme of his presidency promoting diversity in the law and in the association, and history has demonstrated how timely his actions have been. And the program today is just one further example of his personal commitment and the association's commitment to that important goal. I also want to thank the Superior Court judges who agreed to speak today to share their experiences with the rest of us. They and the other panelists, Ms. Downing-Mathis and Ms. Yonta, our facilitator, Ms. Hamilton, all of them have agreed to speak from the heart, I think, really. And that's not an easy task, and I commend them for their courage and their spirit of generosity. Before we move on to the panel presentations, I just wanted to update you on the status of phase 2 of the reopening of the New Jersey courts. It started this past Monday, June 22nd, and is progressing slowly. Our goal at this point is to bring back approximately 15% of our workforce to conduct some proceedings and provide some services that either could not be done remotely or could be done more efficiently in the courthouse. Our division managers have been back working with a skeleton staff, and certain activities have resumed on a very reduced basis. One of the things that has resumed are probation interviews of the high-risk probationers. And this week we also had a drug court session where the judge was present in the courtroom and several individuals, high-risk individuals who had tested positive during the pandemic came in for appearances. As you can imagine, we've been very concerned about our drug court participants, and our probation officers even devised drug testing in the parking lot next to 209, the old courthouse, to be sure that they could keep up with this very sensitive population. We're also gearing up to conduct juvenile proceedings at the courthouse. I think, as many of you know, our juvenile judge, Judge DeBello, is retiring in August. And so it's very important that he be able to conclude some ongoing proceedings before he retires. The courthouses are open only for those that have appointments. And most of the matters that were done remotely in the last few months are going to continue to be remote for the foreseeable future. As some of you may know, we just completed our first virtual grand jury session a week ago today, and the second session of that pilot program is scheduled for this afternoon. We learned a lot from the first session, and we're hoping today goes even better, but one indictment was handed up last week. We're moving slowly, as I said. In phase 3, there will be a 50%, approximately 50% of our staff will be back at the courthouse. We have no idea when that's going to be. We think it's certainly a matter of weeks, and it may be a matter of a few months. A lot depends on what happens with the coronavirus in New Jersey in the next few weeks. But we've continued to hold bench bar meetings. I think the most recent one was the Family Division bench bar. And we've really been grateful for our close working relationship with the Mercer County Bar Association. So please don't hesitate for you to reach out to James, to reach out to Sam, to reach out to your division liaisons if you have ideas for further collaboration between the judiciary and the members of the bar. Meanwhile, stay well and enjoy the presentation today. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Judge Jacobson. I wanted to start with thanking Judge Jacobson, the court staff, the presiding judges, and the entire Mercer Judiciary. The access and offering of information from the Mercer courts has been unprecedented during this difficult time, and we really appreciate this. From the start of the lockdown, the courts took a very proactive approach, and we're very thankful for this leadership and guidance that we've received and the level of communication that we received as a bar association. It's a real benefit to our members and the court functioning as well. First, what I wanted to do was thank the members of our panel for taking the time to speak with us about their experiences and provide their advice and guidance to our members. We have 3 Superior Court judges, the Honorable Janetta Marbury, the Honorable Rodney Thompson, and the Honorable Kay Walcott Henderson, along with Kimberly Yonta, President of the New Jersey State Bar Association, and Jennifer Downing Mathis, Deputy First Assistant Prosecutor and President-elect of the Association of Black Women Lawyers of New Jersey. This is an extremely accomplished and distinguished panel, and the fact they're willing to commit their time and input to this discussion speaks to its necessity and importance. I also want to thank you all for attending this program. It's happening later, as Judge Jacobson mentioned, than we had planned on, and in a very different format and climate than we had planned on. But taking the steps to educate ourselves regarding biases, microaggressions, and discrimination in the legal profession is as important as it ever was. Learning about the obstacles faced by our colleagues is part of how we can take the steps to look out for and eliminate attitudes and biases that are unacceptable. Despite the ongoing pandemic, we see daily reminders of systemic racism, unequal treatment of women, ongoing biases towards people of different genders, races, and sexual orientation. And this is a conversation that is as important as it would have been 3 months ago, in fact, more. What we're going to see today and what we're learning as we go through this process is how important representation is. Representation in terms of diversity means that law students and new attorneys can see themselves in the faces of the judiciary, the attorneys at their firm, or when they're at and they enter into public service, such as with the prosecutor's office, as well as in the associations that they joined, like our association, which is why this is so important and vital. People will not choose to become involved with us if they don't see a role for themselves there. To be a successful ally, you have to actively seek out different perspectives and experiences There's many ways to do that, and today's program is one of them. Our executive director, I will say, Sam Araka, over the last 3 months, as I mentioned, we're doing this in a very different climate and format, has worked tirelessly to keep things going with the Bar Association over these past 3 months, including this transition to these remote programs. And I'm greatly appreciative of Sam's efforts. She's continuing to ensure that this Bar Association will come out of this very strong, and in fact, in some ways, better suited to meet the needs of our members and our community. I'd like to thank our sponsor, James Cortopazzi and his company, Litigation. They're the ones who provided this Zoom platform while we were in the process of upgrading our platform. Today's wonderful attendance, we would not have been able to accommodate on our own Zoom platform. So thank you, James. And I'd also like a special thanks to Ayesha Hamilton, along with CLE Chair Joe Paravecchia. Ayesha has assembled an excellent program for us today. She's a talented presenter, a really successful and dynamic solo practitioner. We're very fortunate to have her guiding us through this. But finally, what I want to tell you is it's not enough just to come to a program, listen like this, and go back to our normal lives. I ask that you take something from this today and apply it, whether it's in your firm, your interactions with the court, or with opposing counsel, or through your advocacy in a leadership position like an association such as this. We're an association comprised of members from a very wide variety of career paths in the public and private sector. And these are lessons that we can really take and apply to all of our endeavors. Small firms can make changes and can make changes quicker actually than the larger firms and institutions. And the more you can do this, the more comfortable you'll be, and better off we'll all be when it becomes second nature. Thank you.
Thank you, James. And thank you everyone for being here. Please put up with us with our technical difficulties. We had a couple of videos that we're going to try and show during the course of this, but if we're not able to, we will make sure that we send out the links as well. I echo James and Samantha's thank you and welcome to our panel. Frankly, as we were preparing for this conference, every time we spoke, I was in awe of these incredible men and women, and I'm excited to be able to share this with you today. But I have to say thank you to Samantha for pulling this together. She is an incredible woman, and without her, I don't think we'd have a bar association. She's just incredible. So as we go through just housekeeping, I will read out CLE codes midway through and closer to the end. You'll have 2 CLE codes. Please make sure you submit your forms to Sam no later than July 2nd, because we have a lot of participants today and she's got to make sure that we all get our ethics credit. Because that's why you're here, right? We also want to encourage a lot of dialogue. And so as we were trying to put this panel conversation together, we thought that perhaps our audience members might be more comfortable than we would actually in person to share their thoughts and share comments or questions that they would like to have. So you can put those questions in a private message to Sam directly in the Zoom application. So consider doing that. Consider, use this as a forum to raise some critical issues. Sam, do you know if we are able to play the video? Do we want to try?
No, Ayesha.
Okay, no worries.
Yeah.
So we were going to begin this presentation with a video called The Look. We will provide you with the link, but a lot of you have probably seen it. It's a Procter & Gamble video about sort of the types of subtle unconscious biases that African-American men and women of color in general face. And so, I really encourage you to take a moment to actually watch that video once the panel is done. I think you'll find that it will resonate with a lot of you. It certainly resonated with me. If you think about who our panel is, the one thing that ties everyone on this panel together, it's clearly not their gender, it is not the color of their skin, it is the belief that you lift as you rise, right? Each of these people has been a mentor, and they are now a mentor. And each of them is here today in their role as a model to us on what good mentoring is, what good allyship is, and how to increase, and we're really focusing on and going to be discussing how to increase diversity in our profession. On Friday, June 12th, our State Bar Association did an incredible panel on allyship. And we're going to be talking about a lot of the similar issues. And the thing that I think is most important for us to think about as we think about who we are as allies, and as we think about how we can advance the cause of diversity and inclusion, two separate terms, right, in our workplaces and in our profession, is we really need to put ourselves in the shoes of those that we seek to be allies of. One of the panelists from the State Bar Association quoted a poem by Paul Laurence Dunbar called "We Wear the Mask." And when you think about, we wear masks now, and we physically actually wear masks. And every time we leave the house, maybe it's once a week, maybe we haven't left the house yet, we really think, we make a threat assessment. We decide, is the place we're going safe? Are we going to be okay? Do we run into a risk of contracting this virus? Well, that's the threat assessment that our brothers and sisters of color make every day of their lives. Is driving a car going to be a risk for them? Is getting stopped by the police a risk for them? I recently saw something on Facebook, right? We're all on Facebook, where they're talking about, when you, as a Caucasian person, get stopped by a police officer, you're irritated, you're thinking, was I speeding? Where's my, do I have my insurance card with me? When a person of color gets stopped, they're thinking, is today the day I'm gonna die? So I think that's something you wanna think about. Also, just this week, the ABA released its study about the role and the issues faced by minority women in the profession, called Left Out and Left Behind. I think this is critical that you read this. Women of color comprise 14% of associates in our profession. They're less than 3.5% of partners in our profession, less than 2% of equity partnerships, and even fewer in top firm leadership positions. So let's start our discussion. And as you hear shared experiences from our panel, I want you to think about how you would handle these situations, how you would stand up for the person telling the story. I want you to role play this in your head and practice it and prepare yourself for a role as an ally. It's critical that you do this. If you've ever been in the situation where someone says something to you and you walk away and 5 minutes later you think of the perfect response, well, that happens to all of us. So here's your chance, as you're listening to our judges and our distinguished panel share their stories, for you to practice in your head what you would have said and how you would have stood up for them. So Judge Walcott Henderson, I'm gonna call on you first. If you would please share some stories of your experiences through your career.
Hello, everyone. I know that my computer is telling me there are 126 participants, and I wish I had one of those huge screens at my house that I see on TV that I could see all of you. I think I had, I heard someone say they participated in a Zoom conference with 500 people. I have no idea how they did that, but they had like little minuscule faces on the screen. So I hope you're all well. And thank you, to our bar president and to Samantha and Ms. Hamilton as well. Now that's a very, the question poses kind of a very broad one. And so I understand, and I do recommend questions. So if you have a question from the participants, do as you were instructed and upload it through Zoom. But I want to echo what the Chief Justice actually and all of Supreme Court justices said in their statement from June 5th, which, if you haven't read it, I think we really ought to. At the end of that statement in particular, they really acknowledge that this is a time for all of us, all Americans, to reflect and to see where we can do more, and to really seize the opportunity to come together as a country, and most importantly, to listen to one another. My experience has been very diverse. I will say that I consider myself, extremely lucky and extremely fortunate to be in this employment and opportunity, and to be on the Superior Court bench in Mercer, where they're just terrific people. I have a very diverse background and a very diverse family. So I don't know how many of you know. I know there are a lot of people on here that certainly know me and know my background. But in addition to being to being an African-American woman, I also, was born in the Caribbean. So I have that as well. I have family. My father is moved here when I was very young. I was about 8 years old, and he became a citizen of this country then. I was actually educated abroad in Barbados, where all of my family's from. And so, my experience in America, I will say, has been perhaps a little bit different than some of my colleagues, just because I have the ability, I think, to really go between a lot of different worlds. So my family is not only here, I've got the bulk of my family in the Caribbean, in a number of different islands. And then I've got my father's siblings who all reside in England. Many of them live in London. So it's just, I will say, though, that no matter where I go, people do have a way of perhaps, at least initially, looking at you, and you recognize that will be the case. It's unfortunate that you couldn't see the video, and I know Samantha was working really hard on it, so I apologize. But most of you have probably seen that video called "The Look," and it's just kind of an interesting portrayal of this young man and this African American man, and he's going about his day. And I won't give away the end of it, but I think it's very interesting and worth looking at, again, as I hearken back to this notion that we ought to take the time to consider some of these very important issues of race and diversity. My path to the bench in terms of, the last, 25 years, I am, a native from New Jersey, at least after high school. I went to Rutgers, I went to Villanova for law school, and then I wanted to really focus on government work, and I wanted to be in the prosecutor's office. And that was where, initially after a year at a firm, Sumner's Counsel, George and Dorch, which was, at that time, the largest minority-owned firm in this area, with really wonderful legacy. I worked for them for a while, and then I went to the prosecutor's office. So I have had my entire career in this area, certainly in Trenton. And after leaving the prosecutor's office, I went to work for a number of different administrations. So I worked for McGreevy initially, and then I worked in the Corzine administration with a stint in the Assembly, the New Jersey Assembly Majority Office for Speaker Joe Roberts. So that's sort of my path. And at the end of Corzine's term, I was appointed to the workers' comp bench, where I had the honor and the pleasure of working with James Cregan. And that was certainly a really wonderful stepping stone to the bench. So that's kind of my path in terms of my employment, and a little bit about my history. So, Ayesha?
Thank you, Your Honor. Judge Marbury, if I may call on you to share your experiences.
One second. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Judge Janetta Marbury, and first I want to thank the Mercer County Bar Association and President Cregan for this program. I'm gratified and proud that so many of my former colleagues in the Mercer County Prosecutor's Office And many senior practicing attorneys that I've dealt with over the years are in attendance. And just to let you know, I scrolled through the participant list and saw your pictures and names. So I'm still working hard to making sure you guys show up for work. I'm a transplant in New Jersey also. I'm originally from Ohio. I came here after I was hired by Phil Karchman, Judge Karchman, to be a prosecutor. I worked at the prosecutor's office in Mercer County for about 3 years, fulfilled my commitment by about 9 days, and then I went to work in a private firm, a house counsel for Cigna Insurance with K. Ruth Larson. Thereafter, when that office closed, I went to work for Cigna and in the corporate office for about 3 years, and then I was recruited by Joe Pocchini to come back to the Mercer County Prosecutor's Office to work in an administrative position. I worked there for about, I forgot how many years, about 9 years, 6 years. Worked there 6 to 9 years, from 2003 to 2012, so 9 years, and ended my stint there as first assistant prosecutor, and thereafter I became a judge. And during that time where I was with the, working as the private firm, I also was a prosecutor with Trenton Municipal Court, working there as a contract prosecutor. And I went to Rutgers, Camden, and I worked during the day and went to school at night. And I am saying all this that there have been many mentors and allies that got me to where I was going. I've had, of course, we tend to look at the people that hire us, and one of the issues that I had with this is how far can we go as far as judges and what we say? What we would have said 3 months ago is somewhat expected to be different than what we say today. Hopefully it won't be, but your questions may cause us to question what we can say, but I'm putting that out there for all the judges. Number one, because I have tenure. So I'm putting that out for all the judges that there are things that we are not allowed or are required to say. There may be some discussion about certain things that are still being worked on or being considered by the AOC. And until that is clear to us what the position of the AOC, therefore our position, we won't be able to speak on those particular issues. But I can say that my climb through whatever I've gone through wouldn't be able without having mentors that have helped me, advised me. And some of my mentors were just people on the same level of working with me, and that we just worked together, that expressed opportunities that I could have, that gave me.
With probation.
There's somebody.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Sir, I understand that you are worried about those things, and you should be. It's my understanding that Catholic Charities reassured us that they're taking the appropriate precautions. We will certainly, I think we have, in fact, voiced your concerns.
If everyone could please mute
Remind our
their
attendees to
mics.
mute themselves.
And we will do so again.
All right. So, and then I've had, like I said, I've had mentors. My first mentor, I would say, in the prosecutor's office was of course dealing with Judge Karchman. We got to realize that back when I was hired in the prosecutor's office, there weren't a lot of Black female prosecutors. There hadn't been, even though we had Judge Thompson to actually be the prosecutor in Mercer County, there weren't many online Black prosecutors. And generally, there was always at least one at any given time in the Mercer County Prosecutor's Office. That has changed, and that is a good thing. Then we go to when I went to the private firm, the person that recruited me, K. Ruth Larson, was actively recruiting a diverse population to work in her office. And people that are around my age that happen to be attorneys, I'm going to tell you what we were told. We were told that if you are Black, you will not be hired by a firm. That's what we were told. So that's why many African-American people of color, that when they started their legal career, either they opened their own office or they went into public service. Ergo, public service. But after 3 years of public service, I evidently, K. Ruth Larson had talked to an attorney here in Mercer County who recommended that I be interviewed for a position. So that is where someone else suggested to an attorney. They took the they accepted that suggestion, took it, and I was hired. After that, when I went back to the prosecutor's office, like I said, I had a history, but still there had not been a first assistant prosecutor of color. Like I said, even though Judge Ann Thompson had been the prosecutor, there hadn't been. So that was Joe Bocchini taking a chance, but of course, that is after I had about 20 years in practice. But the most important thing that I've had as becoming a judge is the opportunity to mentor my law clerks. And that is been the best part of being a judge, because that is your opportunity to place into the profession people that are practicing attorneys, but also have a bit of your history. So I have never been shy about telling whatever happened to me over the years. But I've had, as I said, K. Ruth Larson, Joe Bocchini, Phil Karchman, Judge Sapp Peterson, every judge of color that has gone before me is a mentor for me. Because especially Judge Sapp Peterson, who, I told her, I can fly low because she flew high and took all the shots from below. She's the one that really went through all the things that I don't have to go through now. So many of the previous judges have been allies, mentors, and just a resource. I said I wasn't going to talk that long, but again, it's always interesting because Kay is not from Trenton, Jan is not from Trenton, and being from Trenton is an important thing in the legal community. But even given that, we have had people in this legal community that have supported us. And as I said, there have been many people that were on my level that I work with day to day that were supportive. And I see their names listed here. So I want to thank them for all their help. But other than that, hey, I'm here, I'm working. And the one thing that I will say is that I found that the attorneys that come before me here in Mercer County are respectful of the bench. Sometimes when we first got on here, I was always afraid that maybe I wouldn't be looked at the same way that, Judge Karchman was looked at, Judge Sabatino was looked at, Judge Sapp Peterson was looked at. But I've always found that the bar has looked at the robe. That's the only Black color should matter in the courtroom, the robe. And I always appreciated that I felt that I was respected as a judge, and that the most important thing was the robe, not, particularly the person that was robed in that Black gown. Thank you. That's all I'd like to say at this time.
Thank you, Judge Marbury. I think that was actually a very important message, and I appreciate you sharing. I want to call on Judge Thompson to share his experiences with our audience.
All right, good afternoon, all. I want to start by thanking President Cregan, certainly Ms. Iraka, and the members of the Bar Association for having this opportunity to speak with you. So I'll pick up where Jan left off. I am a Trenton guy. I was born and raised in Trenton. I attended the Trenton Public Schools. And if you know anything about Trenton, you know that attending the public schools comes with a certain set of expectations, usually not high. And I bring this up because I had to fight just to be taken seriously coming from the Trenton Public Schools. Now, for those of you who were present during my formal swearing in, you might have noticed that one of my grade school teachers was present for the swearing in, Ms. Birkenkoff. One of the things that Ms. Birkenkoff taught me at an early age was that whatever I wanted to achieve, whatever I wanted to accomplish, I could accomplish it. Now that was very important because most of the other teachers sent me the opposite message, that college wasn't in my future, certainly not graduate school or professional school. So yes, I am a Trenton guy, but Judge Marbury, being a Trenton guy isn't always the advantage that you might think, certainly in the practice of law. So ultimately, I graduate from Trenton State College, now the College of New Jersey, go on to Syracuse University, where I earned my law degree and a master's degree in public administration, both on full scholarship. After law school, I went directly into private practice, partly because of what Judge Marbury discussed. The messages that I received were basically, don't bother applying for the firms, you're not going to get hired. So I went into private practice myself as a solo. I don't regret it. It worked out pretty well for me. And during the time that I was a solo, my practice was supplemented by service as a public defender in the city of Trenton, where I met and was mentored by people like Judge Blackburn. Judge Marbury might get mad at me. I know she's only 2 or 3 years older than me, but she was there as a prosecutor when I was working as a public defender. And I learned a lot from Judge Blackburn, Judge Marbury, and people like that. So most of you know that before appointment to the Superior Court bench, I served as a municipal court judge in 4 municipalities. Trenton, where I served a full term and was reappointed as chief judge. And I also served in a shared services court in Burlington County, West Hampton. And that court serviced West Hampton, East Hampton, and Hainesport. So I worked as a municipal court judge in one of the busiest courts in Mercer County, and one of the busiest courts in Burlington County. And I really enjoyed doing it. And so I'll just tell a little story about diversity and inclusion. So I spoke about the messages I received in grade school. And while most of the messages were intended to communicate to me what I could not do, there were 1 or 2 people like Ms. Birkenkoff who advocated for me, pushed me, and told me what I could do. All I had to do was have the nerve to believe the positive messages versus the negative messages. But this thing about diversity and inclusion, I think what you have to understand is for most of us of color, it really is a lifelong issue. You would think that after those experiences in grade school and after law school and after 4 degrees and all that, you would think that, okay, well, this guy or this person, they've made it. They don't have to worry about this, that, or the other thing. But the reality of it is that we worry about issues just as much as, for example, the folks from Trenton or Camden or Newark who didn't have an opportunity to go to college or to go to law school. One example might illustrate the point. As municipal court judges went in Trenton, I thought I was pretty good. Now that's not arrogant speaking, but remember, I had the opportunity to work and learn from folks like Judge Marbury, folks like Judge Blackburn when she was a municipal court judge. So something would likely be wrong with me if I didn't learn enough to at least be competent working with the likes of these folks. But even after all of that, when I was being considered in West Hampton, I was the first Black judge to ever sit in West Hampton, ever. And the person I took over for had been there for 15 or 20 years. And the entire talk of the town, the talk of Burlington County, was that the only reason I got the job, I got the appointment, is because I was Black and the appointing authority was Black. Now, they didn't know how hard I worked in Trenton. They didn't know the extra sessions that I put in. They didn't know how I strived for efficiency. They didn't know that the appointing authority and many of the township committee had come to Trenton on several different occasions to view me. So they appointed me because they thought I was the best fit. And as it turned out, it worked out very well. Many of the same people who questioned my qualifications to serve in West Hampton were sad when I left. So the bottom line is this. The bottom line is that diversity and inclusion, these are issues that we need to think about, that we need to be intentional about. But for those of us who are minorities, for those of us who are of color, I think the common theme that you'll hear from all of us is this, is that we simply don't believe the lies. We work hard and we do what we need to do. And I think that if you can do those things, ultimately we'll be successful despite these challenges. But in a way, I think it's a good thing that this bench bar was delayed, because it did give us all the opportunity to sort of live through all that's going on right now surrounding these issues. And so hopefully we will all both have a better understanding and take these discussions more seriously. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. I truly appreciate you sharing that story. And it's not an unusual one. I think those of us of color hear that a fair amount, that we're selected because of the color, or to fit a diversity hire type of analogy. Kim, I would love to call on you. Kim Yonta is our current state bar president, and lucky to have her on this distinguished panel. Kim, I know you've been practicing a while, and I know you've encountered some unpleasantness. Would you be willing to share with us?
Yes, thank you, Ayesha, and thank you to the Mercer County Bar Association for inviting me today. I really appreciate this opportunity. They always say that timing is everything, right? You always hear that. Well, timing is everything. And to echo what Judge Thompson was just saying, delaying this CLE today has really resonated, I think, with all of us. You know, having 126 people on this webinar, we as lawyers have an opportunity right now to take action on what we swore to do when we became lawyers. And that is to defend the Constitution and to pursue justice. And what better time to do that than now? With everything that's going on for Black Lives Matter, for social justice issues, this is the kind of discussion that we need to be having amongst ourselves, amongst our communities, in our county bar associations and the state bar association. So I'm very happy to be here. You know, when Ayesha asked me to think about some of the experiences that I've had, certainly they do not compare to some of my colleagues that are on this call, certainly, nor do they even come close to comparing with what we see in the news today. Because what we're seeing in the news is horrific and it's horrible. And I can only tell you what my experiences have been as a white female attorney, but I can also shed light on how you can take those experiences and make them better and help them work for you. You know, I started out in the prosecutor's office. I too am a transplant to New Jersey. I am not from New Jersey originally. So after law school, I moved down here and clerked for a criminal division judge. Wanted nothing to do with criminal law practice at all. Did not even take the extra courses in law school. Did not intern in a prosecutor's office. My judge ended up getting moved from family to criminal that summer before I started. And so lo and behold, I said, of course, I will still work for you, Judge. And I ended up starting a criminal law clerkship. I loved it. And then I ended up taking a job with the Hudson County Prosecutor's Office in Jersey City, New Jersey. I grew up in a rural Connecticut community in Eastern Connecticut, about a half hour from Rhode Island. No diversity to be spoken of. So I tell you that as background to my story because going from my town in Connecticut, moving to New Jersey, and having people of color all around me, I loved it. I will be perfectly honest with you. I worked in Jersey City for 10 years, and I felt like I was experiencing life in a way that I hadn't before. And I'm going to be open and honest about my conversations with you today. I think that that's what we have to do. And talking about our backgrounds is important to shed light because all of us have different backgrounds. And it's important to reflect back on those backgrounds to see how much we've grown as people and to pursue that growth. I say that because as a prosecutor in Hudson County, it is trial by fire. The caseload is huge. I tried my first murder case 3 years into the office by myself. There was no second chairing in Hudson County Prosecutor's Office at the time. I don't know if that's still the case now, but at that time when I was there, we did not do that. So I had my share of meeting with officers, of working with police officers, and I know Jennifer's going to talk a little bit about that later, but I can tell you that I had times where, as a prosecutor, I had to think about how I was going to handle the situation when you had officers coming to you and essentially saying to you, well, what do you want me to say? And I said, well, I want you to say the truth. And it was almost like that did not resonate. And that wasn't with all officers, but there were some officers that did that. And that was something that I took a particular issue with. And I made sure that those officers knew that that's not how it works. Essentially saying that, well, I'm not going to go forward with a motion to suppress on a case with someone of color on the other side, of course, because you did X and Y and that was improper. So I'm going to go to my superiors, I'm going to explain what's going on, and we're going to dismiss this case. And I don't want to see you doing that type of thing again. And I feel like that's what we have to do when we see something that's wrong in our profession, or when we see something that shouldn't be happening. We have to be able to stand up and take action. So I share that with you because I think it's important. And as a young prosecutor at the time, I didn't know what was going to happen to me, but I knew that I was not going to go forward with a motion where somebody was going to lie about what was happening. Because of my professional ethics, of course, but also because it wasn't right. And how many times do we see something happening that's not right? And we might not say what we need to say or apologize for something that happened when we reflect back and say, you know what, I probably shouldn't have done that. And I need to speak to that person and maybe say, I've reflected on it. And it's something I need to look at for the future. Mentorship. I had great mentors in the prosecutor's office. And I think that it's interesting because the prior speakers have all talked about how they've had public service as part of their career. I think that that was particularly important for me in my public service job, where I had people that I could count on in that office to look to as to how to be a prosecutor, how to move up through the office and become, you know, a trial team supervisor and then the chief of the appellate unit. I loved that job, and I'm so grateful to those mentors that I have and I still speak to. They are still mentors to me in my career. And I look to turn that to the other side. I'm a mentor as well. I coached the Rutgers University mock trial team for nine years, and now a lot of my students are now lawyers who are in the Young Lawyers Division at the State Bar Association now. So it really is gratifying to see these young college students become lawyers and actually have cases, and they're moving up on the leadership in the Young Lawyers Division. I think that's something special, and it's nice to see that happening. So I encourage all of you to take part in mentoring in some way, because as much as you're giving to that other person, I feel like I'm getting so much more back as part of that experience. So I hope that everybody can do that for the future. But I want to really make sure that everybody understands that standing up for what is right and being an ally is really what it's all about.
Thank you so much, Kim. I appreciate that. And Jennifer, you are in great company on this panel, but you're a tough cookie in your own right. So I'm going to call on you to share some of your experiences.
Thank you. And I want to begin, as the rest of the panelists did, thanking our bar president for putting this together. This was put together before we were experiencing the recent things regarding racism and the treatment of Black people that has happened since we're here today. I'm going to answer this question a little bit differently in that I am going to share some specific stories. Another part of the outline, if we have time, I'm going to discuss mentorship and allyship because that's another section. But just to give you quickly a little bit of my background, I was born in Trenton, that's where the hospital was. But I'm born and raised local, I grew up in Lawrence. I come from a proud Black law enforcement family. That is the reason why I decided to become a county prosecutor, because of the strong law enforcement background that I have, with my father being a career lifelong police officer, detective, and then undersheriff, the first Black undersheriff that Mercer County had. So I am proud of that. As some of the other panelists have explained, it was said to me that I would never get hired by a firm. I actually had interviews set up by firms, but once they found out I was Black, the interview just went away or didn't happen. And this is going back to 1997, 1998-ish. I did clerk for Judge Paulette Sapp Peterson. So she used to call me Dorothy because I was naive, I'm very shy, and she made me strong. She did. Working for her, you had to be strong. I also say that one of my mentors, and we'll talk about mentorship later, but it goes to one of the stories that I have, is at the time my father was a Trenton police officer, so he knew of now AAG, acting insurance for our prosecutor Tracy Thompson. And he brought me to her as a law student to her office and sat me down and said, here, she's doing what you want to do, talk to her. And I think people like Tracy, like Judge Sapp Peterson, like Judge Marbury. I worked with Judge Kay Walcott Henderson for a short time before she left the office. I cannot stress the importance of diversity and the importance of seeing someone that looks like you doing the job that you do. It sounds kind of corny, but when I grew up, I was a Cosby kid. Don't like what Bill Cosby did right now, but I grew up watching The Cosby Show and seeing Felicia Rashad as a lawyer. I was like, I want to do that. I mean, it was that simple. And one of the things that I've done throughout all of the prosecutors that I've worked for is going out into the community, especially in our schools, to let the young people see Black attorneys, Black prosecutors doing things, because it's just that simple for a Black child or a brown child to see someone that looks like them doing a job that they do. So I cannot stress the importance of that. I had actually never even seen a Black female detective until I started working at the prosecutor's office. I grew up in Lawrence and all the cops were white and they were mostly men. And law enforcement is a mostly male dominated field and a mostly white male dominated field. I was a little girl selling Girl Scout cookies at Trenton Police, so I did see other detectives of color, but Black detectives, but I never saw women. Not until I started working. And I really never even knew it was a possibility until I saw them. You know, I thought you had to be big and burly and mannish, and that's just not so. So I cannot stress the importance of just seeing someone that looks like you doing the job. But to the stories, okay? My stories begin just on my way to work. Being a Black professional and a Black attorney in law enforcement, it's just its own unique little place. And, you know, I had an epiphany the other day that I feel visible and invisible at the same time. And I'll explain that. Obviously, when you look at me, you see a Black person or a Black woman. I can't erase it or deny it or pull off the mask or anything else. It's who I am. But at the same time, if I'm not in the courtroom or have my badge or doing something official, if I'm just going about my day in a store or in a supermarket, then I become invisible in that people will only recognize me when I'm in court. But if I were just in my personal life and try to say hello or see you in a store, I'm basically just this random Black face because you only connect me with that profession. But it begins with me driving to work. I have a county vehicle for law enforcement. Our tags are confidential. And even this year, last year, if I'm driving down Route 1, wherever I'm going, I get pulled over because in my interpretation, I'm driving while Black, but I'm driving this vehicle, tags not on file, which they don't expect a Black person to be driving. And I get pulled over for no other reason. I haven't done any traffic violations. It's, oh, these tags come up not on file. Is this your car? Is this a new car? And they ask me all these questions when it's well known throughout the law enforcement community what that means. And I then have to go the extra step of saying who I am and showing my badge. I've even had to go in my glove box and show registration and insurance. It goes that far. So it begins when I leave my house in the morning. Then when I enter the courthouse, and it doesn't happen so much anymore because I've been around 22, 23 years, but depending on who's at the door, depends on how quickly or not quickly I get in. And yes, we all have to wear ID, and yes, there are procedures, but lots of people don't. And white attorneys and white people can walk in with their briefcases and their arms full of files and not show anything. But oftentimes the Black person or the Black attorney with the briefcase and me as a prosecutor coming in a special entrance with an armful of files, I'm often stopped. Well, who are you? Well, I didn't know who you were. Or, well, I didn't see your ID. And I don't even, I know later on, I believe Judge Marbury is going to talk about letting certain arguments roll off your back and you pick and choose your battles. And I really don't fight about it that much anymore the way I used to. I just, you know, say who I am, and I usually have my sunglasses on my forehead and flip them up and keep on walking. But early on in my career and different times, it becomes bothersome and troublesome, and you're not quite sure how to handle it. And again, how to handle it and how I mentor the younger attorneys, I'll talk about later on if we have time. So, okay, now I'm in the courthouse. I now have to get into the courtroom. And again, there is implicit bias, unconscious bias, whatever you want to call it, but many, many, many times I am anybody but the prosecutor. I'm not even an attorney. I'm a clerk. or the law clerk or a family member of the defendant or anybody other than an attorney or the prosecutor. When I am an attorney, I'm usually assumed to be a defense attorney. And that's nothing against defense attorneys. And it's funny because it's not funny, but we actually had this issue a few weeks ago where everyone on the call, we were making a subcommittee, and the ones that were known to be prosecutors were, you're a prosecutor, oh, and Jennifer, you're a defense attorney, right? And there's nothing wrong with being a defense attorney, but it's that implicit bias. Why is your first assumption that that is what I do instead of being a prosecutor? And it happened a few weeks ago, and it has happened throughout my career. I've been mistaken for another prosecutor that's Black. Sometimes there are attorneys waiting for Jennifer to appear when I've been sitting there all day, but I don't look like your stereotypical Jennifer because they're not expecting a Black woman. When I've gone to different trainings within the office or outside of, within the courtroom, or if I go to different venues to train, they may go to my white counterpart or my white colleague and assume that they are the chief when I was running a unit, or they are the supervisor as opposed to me. Again, you pick and choose your battles. First, starting in the office, it's also a generational thing, which I think we'll talk about later, as far as whether you want to fight, or how you handle it. And we have suggestions for that. And the Mercer County Bar is a wonderful organization. It's very welcoming. I have been a member since I was a law clerk. I'm a member of the Inns of Court, and I'll talk about that at mentorship because I think it's important to be a part of these organizations. I'm currently vice president. Saturday, I will be president-elect of the Association of Black Women Lawyers, and they are an awesome organization for mentorship, for leadership, and even for handling situations like this, just talking about it among ourselves. Well, how do you handle this? Or what would you say to someone? And I guess lastly, I'll just mention that, there's lots of issues that go on when you are a Black attorney and when you are a female Black attorney. There's issues of racism, of classism, of sexism, and it just occurs all the time. And I will give people the benefit of the doubt on the outset that they might not understand what they meant. They might not understand that it's offensive to assume that someone Black is a defense attorney all the time, or, get your name wrong and just say, oh, sorry, or, have a conversation with me all day. And then the next time you see me in court, you don't know who I am. And we have that same conversation over again. But we were hoping that through these stories that the panel shares and that we share, that people will think before they speak. They will leave this presentation thinking about how to talk to people, and just think about what they're saying and what it means, if you don't get a Black person's name correct, or you mistake them for someone else, or there's some sort of slight as to who you are in the courtroom, what you do, and that type thing. So we were hoping by sharing our stories that you will think about some of the things that were said. Just one thing really quickly, and I have the permission of this person to say it, but even starting in the office, I was cautioned about being friends with Tracy Thompson because she's very outspoken. And I was told, hey, you better watch your friendship with her because you're going to be labeled like her. And people are going to judge you like her. And I had been friends with her from the instant that I met her. Let's see, I interned in 1995. I think I met her before that. So it might have been 93 or 94. And, it did not stop me, but just even comments like that, it's the stereotype that you're defensive, or if you're outspoken, you're militant or you're difficult. All of those comments have been said about me and to me. And in light of what's going on in our country right now, I feel a little empowered to talk about things like that we've experienced. And we hope that just through continued discussions, continued talks, those difficult talks that make you squirm and feel uncomfortable, but that people realize that they need to choose their words more carefully, and they need to think about Black people, their colleagues and their coworkers differently after leaving this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. I appreciate you sharing those stories. And I think it is very important that we all put ourselves in each other's shoes. And I think that's an incredible takeaway. I'm going to give you your first CLE code, 51281. The first CLE code is 51281. And we'll put that in the chat box as well. And Jennifer, what you mentioned, and we're going to jump ahead a little bit, right? We're going to, we've had incredible discussions about what you have all experienced in your journeys through your careers, and the types of comments that are hurtful and problematic. In fact, some of those comments were detailed in the ABA study I referenced that was actually just released this week. So women of color reported that they were often charged with being aggressive for advocating and arguing in the same manner as their white counterparts. Hair and outfit choices were scrutinized by judges and colleagues, and nobody ever comments on, you know, a man's or a white man's suit. Many were often praised for being articulate or competent in their job in a way that really undermines them. I can't count on my fingers and toes the numbers of times that I've been complimented for how well I speak English. It's difficult. An Asian attorney pointed out that a referee in an oral argument interrupted her 22 times as compared with 4 times for the male opposing counsel. And the referee repeatedly referred to her by her first name while addressing male counsel by the title of Mr. It seems little, she said, but it's not. It indicates the kind of condescension and lack of respect that we feel, and that she, as a woman of color, has to go up against all the time. So the stories that our panel has shared, along with the stories that are in the ABA study, really show you the very small ways every day that attorneys of color face what we're going to say are unconscious biases. I don't think that anyone's out there being intentional, for the most part, no one's out there being intentionally racist, but these are unconscious biases. And so part of the objectives of this program is to make sure that we're conscious of that these things are actually happening, and it's important for us not to ignore them. So Judge Marbury, during our preparations for this program, we talked about the perception that there are different standards for diverse candidates in the hiring process. Would you talk to us a little bit more about that?
Sure. I'm first going to talk about a particular experience I had when I was working for Cigna Insurance, and they had a diversity program where for 3 days, the managing attorneys of the office all got together, and you know, it's the diversity program, the program that in case you get sued for not being diverse, or you get sued for discrimination, you can say, I had this program. But the problem was, first, that they didn't have any minority attorneys to attend the program to give any information that were managing attorneys, because all the managing attorneys were either male or white or female and white. So they had no people of color. So they had to get lower level attorneys, the line attorneys, to come in and to give the perspective of people of color working within the offices. But one of the issues was not the fact that they weren't hiring people of color and the difficulty of hiring people of color, attorneys. Most of us, again, had come from the public sector. Most of us have been prosecutors where we knew how to try cases. So one attorney said, one managing attorney said, you know, I just can't find Black attorneys. He said, I had 2 guys that I interviewed and they were super, super attorneys. He said, I would have loved to hire them, but they were so good, they were hired by Wall Street. And I looked at him and said, why is that the requirement for Black attorneys? You're not hiring super white attorneys. If a mediocre white attorney is good enough to do this job, why can't a mediocre Black attorney be good enough to do this job? And that's what I'm talking about, the buried standards. We all have perceptions, stereotypes that we have for every group of people, whether it's race, gender, ethnicity, nationality. I'm not going to go through them because I don't believe in supporting them by saying them, but we do. If you're Irish, somebody's got something to say about you. If you're Asian, somebody's got a criteria that you're supposed to fit. But as to a person of color, a Black person of color, and Jen kind of put my age on this by saying that, you know, there's a generational difference. Yeah, there's a generational difference. My generation of Black people was probably raised as about as white as you were. And it's because we watched the TV, we had the movies, everything in our education, even our education, was white oriented. So of course we have a different perception. And I did say, you need to pick your battles, but when you pick your battles, you come in there armed to the teeth. Just like in that particular situation where that person had a misperception of fairness. I always said that it is presumed that when a white attorney interviews for a job that they are competent. It is presumed that when a Black attorney interviews for a job that they're not competent. And you got to figure out, you know, is this person competent? No. It became to a point where we ourselves, when we heard that we shouldn't apply for firms, we did it to ourselves. I have to admit, we were told don't bother because they weren't going to hire you. But we also learned that when you did bother, they weren't going to hire you. I had a friend who went to private schools, went to Boston University, went to the best colleges. From his resume, you would never know he was a Black man. When he got into interviewing, he said they wouldn't even ask him a question. He knew from the minute he went into interview, when they saw he was Black, they had no interest in him. So what he did was he put on his resume that he was a member of the Black Law Students Union of BALSA. He didn't get any more interviews. So we're not saying this just for perception. We're saying this from actual conduct. But the reason that I brought this up is because in some respects, those standards still remain. The perception that a Black person has to be twice or three times better than their white counterpart to do the same job still permeates the decision to hire. And I'm not saying that you just hire someone because they're Black, but I'm also saying that you look at your standards of hiring. And if you could look at the resume first and see whether you would hire that person based upon their resume. And then when you interview them, if something about the way they look affects whether or not you are hiring, maybe you should consider what are your real standards for hiring. I know from my own history that there have been times when You know, I just didn't fit, I just didn't fit the picture that someone had of who they were hiring. And that can happen whether you're black, white, blue, gray, grizzly, green, that can happen. But is the reason that the person you're not hiring is because of what they look like, not what they can do to make your business profitable. I mean, I'm going to say it right here. There are firms that have mostly black clients and don't have a black attorney working at the firm. I'm not saying you have to have a black attorney. I'm not saying you have to have a Hispanic attorney, but I'm saying look at what would make your firm more profitable. Look at what would make your firm more diverse, because with a diverse population in your firm, you would be surprised at the strength of the firm of your would grow. It would change the view of your firm. And I have to tell you guys, it's time.
Thank you, Your Honor.
After 30 some years, it's time.
Ayesha, I just wanted to say, to comment on something that Jan said. Obviously, you know, I agree with everything you said in terms of the fact that there is a different standard. But I also, as the parent of two young men, you know, I often find telling them that same message, which is perhaps not a good thing to do. In other words, saying to them, well, you need to be better, right? You need to be twice as good. And you know, I've been reflecting on that, because in communicating that message to you know, anyone, that you're not good enough in who you are and you have to be twice as good as others, perhaps it could be looked at something that is necessary. But I'm of the mind lately that it's a way to just add to reinforce that standard. And so I don't really like to do that anymore. I don't want to reinforce the standard that you have to be twice as good, or reinforce the standard that you are not good enough, right? Or add that additional stress, because that adds and just compounds the notion that your grades as a good student and, you know, and as someone who is actively pursuing a career that you are qualified for, somehow if your parent or your mentor, if you talk about Jennifer's you know, points about mentoring, if your mentor is giving you the message that, you know, you need to be twice as good as the next candidate, then perhaps that is self-defeating, because can you be twice as good? And so in opening up this conversation, and hopefully the message here overwhelmingly seems to be just think about these things a little more, and think about how you, their effect, the effect of your actions upon everyone, but including people of color, that's not a really good message. So I just wanted to offer that.
I think that's it's a great point. And it's something that, you know, we always say, well, women and minorities, we tap dance backwards in heels, right? We have to do that just to be considered on par. And I think it's a great point to raise, that maybe we need to stop giving that message to the next generation, that we need to change the system in a different way. I think could talk about this topic all day. So I think I have to jump forward. And I want to bring James up to the mic for a bit, because segueing directly from this point of, we've really been focused on what women and minorities have to do to appear to be better candidates. But I think, James, would you talk to us a little bit about what firms can do to be more intentional and more targeted about ensuring diversity in their ranks, and ensuring not just the diversity, but inclusion, and ensuring that attorneys of color and women are retained in the firms?
Thanks, Ayesha. Yeah, and so I think one of the things that we talked about today that is very apparent is if you don't take action and you don't take interest, we heard from Judge Thompson that all but one teacher at the elementary school level, told him that he wasn't going anywhere, but one of them did and saw that light inside him. Jennifer Downing Mathis took one specific example in television and took that as a motivating factor. Small moments like that can help somebody get past all of the tremendous obstacles that this system and not just the legal profession have put in their way. So some of the things that we're doing, Ayesha asked me to talk about some of the steps we take at Stark & Stark as an example of a larger firm in terms of how we're addressing the issues of diversity and inclusion, because it's not just enough to attempt to become more diverse and to support that. If you don't set up an environment where people can succeed and want to stay, then you're not really accomplishing anything. So we have, from the beginning of this process that our firm's been involved with, we have a diversity and inclusion committee that is now comprised of both attorneys and staff members at our office, so that we're getting the perspective of not just the lawyers at the firm, but across the spectrum and the input and valuing the input of the legal staff, who are the backbone of any large law firm. We started a few years back with specific training. We hired a consultant to meet with the various groups of employees, starting with the equity shareholders, right through the staff. And we're still involved in this process to talk about unconscious bias, to talk about these microaggressions, these many small things that when they add up, they're gonna create a wall that nobody can get past. And so we've met with the consultant, but it's important to also know that you don't just have to reach out to somebody that this is their job. I mean, there's many professionals, such as this program we have today, who will offer you their insights and guidance in terms of what you're doing wrong, how to improve that. And it's very important to remember that there's not one magic wand you can wave and address the entire problem. You're going to have to keep changing and adapting. So for example, one of the things that we're moving towards is a more structured interview system where we address the same set of questions and program in an interview with a candidate, regardless of their background, so that if you were meeting with a white attorney or a female attorney or a Black attorney, you're asking them the same set of questions and not skewing the interview because you happened to have something in common with that white male attorney, and all of a sudden their interview goes off on a tangent where some connection is made, and they're making a better connection because they happen to have a similar background to you. Part of our mission at our firm is that this is part of our core value, that it's listed as one of the tenets that we embrace, that we are pushing. It doesn't happen without pushing. It's not going to happen overnight. As far as hiring, we make sure that if we're interviewing for a position, whether it's an attorney or staff member or a director, that we're interviewing a diverse pool of candidates, that every person you're not sitting down doesn't look like me. If that's what's going on, we're not accomplishing anything, and we're not bringing in different perspectives to our practice and our clients. As Judge Marbury said, a significant number of my clients are people of color, women. I'm in the workers' comp field, so I am representing people that are very different than me, that oftentimes don't see a lawyer that looks like them. So it's important to have people in your firm and perspectives of people in your firm that aren't the same as your background. As far as hiring, so we have a specific policy that we're looking for a diverse group of candidates. As far as our summer law clerk program, for example, we make sure to interview a wide variety of people for the program. We look to the specialty law student associations, minority bar associations, women lawyers associations at the law schools to draw a diverse pool of candidates, to make sure that we're reaching out to them, not just assuming people will find us. We post an ad. We're emphasizing that one of the things we're looking for is a diverse group of candidates. And during the interviews, we'll ask the summer law clerks, for example, their attitudes and opinions on diversity and what maybe they can bring to the firm in terms of our efforts. So we're addressing it early on, making sure that they know that this is not only something important to us, but it's a way to see what their perspective is on this. We have specifically a women's initiative. So we have a program within the firm because obviously female attorneys at the partnership level, at the management level, are historically underrepresented as well. And so we have a program set up specifically with mentoring. And I spoke to one of the heads of our women's initiative, and some of the things they do, for example, are bring in a management consultant to talk about interacting with the staff and some of the things that we as lawyers don't necessarily get a lot of training in a law school. And all of a sudden you're hired at a law firm and you're in charge of people when you've never managed people before. And so these aren't issues specific to female attorneys necessarily, but there are times when the management training is something that's something that we can offer specifically to a group of attorneys that aren't getting that direction. As far as our firm leadership, we have now, we have a compensation committee comprised of 4 different attorneys. We now have that attorney pool represented. There are 2 female attorneys, 2 male attorneys. So part of our firm leadership is more drawing from a wider swath of attorneys, where typically over the years we may not have had that input. So we do have that. And we've also taken steps to clarify promotions. So when associates move to the partner level, we want them to have an idea early on what's required, the number of years of service, things like that, so that it's not just a behind closed doors type of thing where they have no clue what they're looking for, no clue how long it'll take them. We want there to be some more openness to that practice. And we also, as a firm, have always had a mentorship mentality where myself, I worked directly for Vicki Beyer, and she served as not only my mentor, but now she's my partner in the workers' compensation group. And there's discussion of moving towards more of a sponsorship type mentality, so that you're taking more of a vested interest and role in those attorneys coming up, as opposed to just offering them some guidance and a sounding board, so to say. You're taking some action on their behalf. And so really it takes effort and action to make sure that we're constantly moving forward. It's not something that's going to be fixed overnight. We can't just be comparing ourselves to the bare minimum. Here's what some other firm is doing and we're a little better than that, so great. That's not the standard to use, whether it's a law firm or whether it's a county bar association like ours, because there's a lot of programs and steps we want to take, such as this, to expand the access from our members, to expand the attorneys that we are serving. And it's important to constantly remember that it's going to take a commitment and actual action, not just lip service, not just these would be some nice ideas in theory. And yes, unfortunately, 3 months later from when we were originally supposed to host this event, it's more apparent just how important it is to recognize that there are attorneys, there are judges, there are people in our legal profession that have faced more obstacles than somebody like me can ever imagine. And then not just within our legal field, but outside that, stepping outside their house, day-to-day life, are facing issues that you would think during the pandemic, the coronavirus would be their biggest concern, but clearly it is not. And we're seeing that. So that's why it's just so important that we embrace these social justice initiatives, that we listen to different perspectives, and that we push these efforts within our firms, within our institutions, to continue to grow. And really, Ayesha, that's kind of all I have in terms of specifics. We were going to show a video that was showed a PBS study which compared 2 different resumes, that one of them had a name that would be more associated with a black male, the other a name that would be more associated with a white male. However, the resumes were identical. And the study showed that the resume that appeared more white sounding received 50% more interview requests than the other one. These are the same exact resume. And so that's a very clear example of unconscious bias, cutting somebody off, just as we've heard over and over today. Don't apply at a law firm. It's not going to happen. Don't go down this path. That's not an opportunity for you. And you're just creating more obstacles by doing that. And so these are all the things that bring to light, though, just how real it is. It's not just a story that somebody heard. It's literally scientifically shown that there's people not getting interviews just based on what their resume looks like. So those are some of the steps we're taking as a firm and as an association to try to expand not just the diversity component, but being a more inclusive environment. Thanks, Ayesha.
Thank you, James. I appreciate it, all of the steps that you've taken as a firm. And I think that those are not steps that are limited to large firms. So yeah, small firms are not hiring management consultants and getting, diversity plans. But diversity and inclusion means more than putting a statement about being an equal opportunity employer in your personnel handbook. I will say to you that when we started this discussion talking about allyship is not difficult. A great example of an ally is James. Other members of the Board of Trustees of the Mercer County Bar Association, who, when I went to events and didn't know anybody, would walk up and introduce themselves, shake my hand, introduce me to other people. That meant a lot to me, because quite often there are not other people that look like me in the room. And there was no one else that I could look to feel some sense of camaraderie. And so the fact that people in the room were reaching out to me to express camaraderie meant the world. And that I have experienced in Mercer County. I've experienced at the State Bar. I think we see ourselves, and we need to start seeing ourselves not in terms of sort of groups, but as attorneys and professionals together. And I love that Judge Marbury said, the only black that matters is her robe, right? And it really matters that we are together in a profession. So because we need to make sure that you get your CLE credits, we're going to skip through a lot of the other mentorship conversation that I think could be a CLE of its own, and more of the allyship conversation that could be of its own. We even had a discussion that would have been somewhat funny about things that we all do to fit in, like smoke cigars with cops or drink scotch, which I don't mind that much. But we're going to jump to Kim, and I'm going to ask Kim Yonta to take the mic and talk about the proposed changes to our Rule of Professional Conduct 8.4G. So Kim, you're up.
Thanks, Ayesha. And we could add to that list that you just talked about. I used to listen to sports radio on the way into court every day, just so I knew what everybody was talking about. The fact that I like sports was good, but I wanted to make sure that I knew who threw the touchdown and what the score was of the night before. Just small things that we do as minorities in the profession, sometimes to make sure that when you're in the room, you know what's being talked about and you can contribute appropriately. Moving on for the ethics credit, 8.4G. While New Jersey's existing RPC 8.4G prohibits discriminatory conduct, it is limited to conduct in a professional capacity, and it includes a workplace exception. About 3 years ago, when Paulette Brown was the ABA president, she had put together a Commission 360 with regard to racial inequities in the law. And one of her touchstones was looking at this RPC and looking to see if they could make the model rule better. And what came out of that was a more expansive model rule that specifically prohibited harassing as well as discriminatory conduct that was related to the practice of law without exception. And you might say, well, what does that mean? And many of you may know about this rule already, or the proposed rule that's before our Supreme Court. If you don't, I think it's in the materials that are provided as part of this. But essentially what it does is it changes the New Jersey rule so that any lawyer, it is professional misconduct for a lawyer to engage in conduct that the lawyer knows or reasonably should know is harassment or discrimination. That part of the language is a change from our current model rule. It also adds the fact that it is based on the basis of race, sex, religion, national origin, ethnicity, disability, age, sexual orientation, gender identity, marital status, or socioeconomic status in, this language has changed, conduct related to the practice of law. And those two, the intent element as well as the type of conduct that is prohibited, is what has been changed with this model rule versus what the New Jersey rule is. So what does this mean? And is it different from, how is it different from the current rule? Well, those are the issues, but to look at it more closely, you have to look at what the definitions are. How does the rule in the comments define harassment? Discrimination and harassment by lawyers in violation of that paragraph undermines confidence in the legal profession and the legal system. Such discrimination includes harmful verbal or physical conduct that manifests bias or prejudice towards others. Harassment includes sexual harassment and derogatory or demeaning verbal or physical conduct. That is a little bit different than what we have in New Jersey now. And I'll go into that, but let's look at the language for conduct related to the practice of law. That includes representing clients, interacting with witnesses, co-workers, court personnel, lawyers, and others while engaged in the practice of law, operating or managing a law firm or law practice, and participating in bar association, business, or social activities in connection with the practice of law. Lawyers may engage in conduct undertaken to promote diversity and inclusion without violating this rule by, for example, implementing initiatives aimed at recruiting, hiring, retaining, and advancing diverse employees, or sponsoring diverse law student organizations. So those are the two areas with the definitions that are prescribed in the model rule versus what New Jersey does. The ABA further went on with its model rule to apply what is being called the Batson comment. If you're familiar with Batson versus Kentucky with regard to peremptory challenges and the fact that they are prohibited from being used on a race or gender basis. So that rule, and in the ABA comment, is that a trial judge's finding that peremptory challenges were exercised on a discriminatory basis does not alone establish a violation of paragraph G. A lawyer does not violate paragraph G by limiting the scope or subject matter of the lawyer's practice, or by limiting the lawyer's practice to members of underserved populations in accordance with these rules or other law. So it seems that the ABA has thought about these scenarios with regard to the practice of law and how that would work for attorneys. In 2017, the New Jersey State Bar Association promoted adopting this rule in the current format that I just highlighted for you and sent a letter to the Supreme Court. It's my understanding the Supreme Court is reviewing the rule currently as it's been stated, and is having conferences. Of course, it was going on before this pandemic occurred and before the courts got closed and the meetings kind of died down. So they have not met about it. But they have asked us at the State Bar Association to review this rule and look at it to see whether we would still be promoting it in the way that it is. Because there have been other states that have adopted it, but there have other states that have chosen not to adopt it because of First Amendment issues. What I can tell you is that it is still under consideration by our Supreme Court. And we, as a State Bar Association, our current position is that we are supporting it.
Kim,
While we are, yep, go ahead.
What is some of the opposition that you've heard to this rule, to the adoption of the rule?
So that is actually where I was going right now. So some of the issues are, when you look back at the 1994 official comment by the Supreme Court of New Jersey, when they had the modification to 8.4G originally, the Supreme Court had stated that the addition of paragraph G was, quote, intended to make discriminatory conduct unethical when engaged in by lawyers in their professional capacity. The comment further indicated that after the initial publication of the proposed paragraph G, the Supreme Court revised the proposed amended rule, quote, by making explicit its intent to limit the rule to conduct by attorneys in a professional capacity, to exclude employment discrimination unless adjudicated, and to restrict the scope to conduct intended or likely to cause harm, and to include discrimination because of sexual orientation or socioeconomic status. So what the current rule and what some of the opposition is that you are broadening that area of essentially prosecution for ethical rule violation, because now you are making it so that there is no exclusion for employment discrimination unless adjudicated. Right now, the rule makes it so that you have to complete your proceedings in the tribunal before it can be considered before the rule for a rules of ethics violation, but that would eliminate that exclusion. Another issue that some take opposition with is the idea that the intent has changed. Right now, the rule is that it must be intended to harass or discriminate. The new rule, the model rule, is it says that you should know or reasonably should know that the conduct that you've participated in is harassment or discrimination. So it does zero in that effect, but I think the most opposition that I'm hearing from many lawyers is the idea that what is the term of professional capacity? It seems that the current rule really kind of zeroes in on it about the fact that it's really part of your practice of law, whereas now the language seems to be a lot more broad and inclusive of all of your actions. Look, part of it is, and the proponents say, if you're in the courtroom and you're mistreating court personnel or others, that's part of the practice of law. So what else does this broaden? Some opponents say, well, then when you're on a CLE, for instance, now, that could be viewed, if you say something that is inappropriate and you should know that it could be reasonably seen as harassment, then you should know that that's an ethical violation. You know, but isn't that part of our practice of law? My sitting here and talking about the law and the practice, aren't I in my practice of law when I'm doing that as a lawyer? And then some of the opponents also say that, you know, if you're at a bar activity, if you're at the State Bar Convention in Atlantic City, how far does that go? Is that part of your professional capacity? So the other idea is that for the opposition is that they look at it as there's no way to stop someone from being retaliatory under this model rule, because a complaint can be filed and the district ethics committee will have to investigate and investigate that complaint accordingly. So how far can that go, and what is the definition? How will that be interpreted?
And Kim, I know when we had chatted about model rule 8.4G, which I know, you know, we certainly support in concept. I think the time has come. But some of the opposition that seems to be raised is also, you know, defining the terms of, you know, what the harassment means. I think that the LAD and the case law that supports the LAD, or that goes along with the LAD interpretation, would apply there. But one of the terms included in here that does not appear in the LAD is the harassment or discrimination based on socioeconomic criteria. And that, I think, you know, some of the opposition raises some concerns about what that actually means in terms of hiring clients? You know, what is that going to impact it? Have you seen any discussion about that at all?
So I will tell you, I went back and compared that particular language with the prior rule, Ayesha. That is something that people have brought up, but the socioeconomic language is in our current New Jersey rule. So the fact that the current rule may not be mirroring the LAD, like you're pointing out, is something that maybe we need to look at as well. What I don't want to happen is that nothing gets done because of opposition. I think that this is an important issue, and that's why I'm glad that you're having the discussion today, because I think more lawyers need to know about it and view it as such, because how we handle ourselves as attorneys and the oath that we took is so important. And so I'm glad that we're discussing it today, because I think it's an important issue. You know, there are other people that have thought about proposed language for amendments to it to make sure that the Supreme Court considers it in even a fashion that could end up being a compromise. So, you know, I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen, but there's a lot of discussion and debate going on right now. I think it's on pause right now because of the pandemic. That's my understanding anyway. I'm trying to get some more feedback from the Supreme Court committee about that. But certainly I will keep all of the members apprised, and of course, you know, your county bar representatives apprised of what's going on as it happens.
Great. Thank you so much, Kim. I appreciate that. And with that, I'm going to give you your second CLE code, which is 63102. 63102. And unfortunately, we've got like 5 minutes left. But Sam, were there any questions that were submitted?
No, Ayesha, I haven't received any questions in the chat.
Okay, so I am then going to call on each of our panel members to give us their 1-minute tip on mentoring and allyship and how we can all be intentional and directed to make sure that we're actually moving the needle. Judge Marbury, would you go first, please?
Yes, thank you. I just want to also, I forgot to name one of my most important mentors, Judge Audrey Blackburn. So I wanted to put that in there, because if it ever got back to her that I didn't name her, I would be up the creek. But I also want to tell everybody to go forward without fear. As it said in Dune, fear is the mind killer. So if you see it, say it. Don't be afraid. As my mother often says, if we bite you, we won't eat you. So please take that one step. Take the one step. And if you want to talk to me, and I'm sure the rest of the judges, other people on the panel, just talk to us and find out what's going on and hear more, I'm sure we'll all be willing to talk to you off the bench. But I want to thank you all for attending, and I hope you got a grain of something that will grow and season your life. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Marbury. Judge Thompson, would you go next?
Yes, and again, thanks for the opportunity to appear today. My advice is really just to be intentional. Be intentional in your thoughts, be intentional in your language, be intentional in your actions, because at the end of the day, all of us have stereotypes, all of us have biases, and really what this comes down to is retraining our brains in terms of what we need to do. Listen, as much as we talk about some of the problems, we can also talk about some of the solutions. Like, for example, I mentioned some of the mentors that I've had over the years, but Tony Martinez, for example, when I was a young municipal court practitioner, was a tremendous source of support, as was my fellow Syracuse Law alum, Frank Flax, as was Nick Travisano. So it might not necessarily come down to you hiring somebody. That's great if you can do it, but if you can give them an encouragement, if you can give them help on a case, that's all important too. So all the pieces matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Judge Walcott Henderson.
Thank you so much. And Judge Thompson just mentioned all the names of the people who, you know, when I was a young attorney, were also there for me. And mentoring is super important. I thank people like Judge Audrey Blackburn. Hers was the first chambers that I ever actually entered. And I'll never forget that. And of course, the Honorable Judge Chap Peterson. I want to just end with this. Every year, every term, every season, with the permission, obviously, of my ASJ, I do have interns. And I consider my interns, I'm hopeful that they are a path to law clerks, but I embrace them. I consider it important to train them. And that is how I choose to spend my mentorship and mentoring time. It may not be after work, but it's during court hours. And even this summer, with the difficulties that we're encountering, working from home, I have an intern coming in. One just left, she's going to her firm, and one is starting on July 1st. So just do it, right? Just do it. I'll quote just very, very quickly something that I love from Desmond Tutu. He said, "We have tended to treat the weak, the poor, the unemployed, the failures with disdain, because success and power have become the gods at whose altar we have burned incense and bowed the knee. We have been embarrassed by compassion and caring as things that were inappropriate in a harsh, callous world." I say to you, this is also from him, instead of separation and division, all distinctions make for a rich diversity, to celebrate and to be celebrated for the sake of the unity that underlies them. We are different so that we know our need of one another. I just love that. And I would remind everyone here is an attorney or a judge, so I know that you know this, but go back to the beginning. I went to law school because I felt, and I still believe, that the law is the great equalizer. So let's do justice.
Thank you, Your Honor. That was beautiful. Kim, give us your last advice.
I don't know that I'm in the position to give advice as far as any of this goes, but I can say, what I'm doing is I'm acting, and I'm not just using my words to act. The State Bar Association, we came out with a statement, as did other organizations, but that's just not enough, and we can do better. We can all do better. So let's try and effectuate change. Let's take this opportunity that we are given. We have to pursue justice, we have to defend the Constitution, and we have to act. And now is the time to act. You will be seeing in upcoming days about the State Bar. I've created a commission on racial equity in the law. We are going to be acting. We are going to be looking at policy changes throughout the state of New Jersey in the legal profession. We're going to be acting in ways that we haven't acted before in an effort to effectuate change, to make sure that we can have some goals that we attain this year, to make sure that many of these things change and change for the better and long term. So I just say, you know what, you can talk all you want, but if you don't act, then what good is it?
Thank you, Kim. And Jennifer, give us your last words.
Thank you. I did type it into the chat, some of the things I wasn't able to say. I would tell all attorneys, especially young attorneys, to seek out a mentor. I would be remiss if I did not mention the fact that it was former prosecutor Daniel Giaquinto who hired me and gave me a chance when other firms and offices didn't. Former prosecutor Joseph Elbocchini promoted me and still remains a mentor and a friend, and current prosecutor Angelo Onifrey promoted me to deputy first. And these are all accomplishments I never thought I would achieve as a young Black girl just growing up in Mercer County. I also would be remiss if I didn't mention that our State Bar President, Kim Yonta, she puts her money where her mouth is. She was actually on one of the Zoom calls where I was assumed to be a defense attorney. And she did call me up afterwards and we had a discussion about it and we talked about it. And as far as being an ally, that's all it takes. Make that phone call, have that difficult discussion if it happens to be difficult for you, and continue to have those discussions with your coworkers, with your colleagues. And just remember your words. that they do hurt, they do matter. Think about the other person before you speak, and people will remember how you made them feel and how you treat them. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. And thank you to everyone for being here with us. I want to give James a last word as well. James?
I should thank you. And I just want to thank again everybody for sharing their stories, advice, and guidance today. As far as mentoring, it's one of the most important things you can give to newer attorneys, to another attorney in your practice area. But you sort of have to broadcast that you are there and open, because it shouldn't be up to the newer attorney to figure out who is and isn't approachable. And also to attorneys looking for guidance, you take people at their word. The ones that are putting it out there, those are the ones to reach out to first. And that's how you build up your support network and your network of guidance, because it is very important not to be in isolation and trying to work through things completely on your own. It's just not it's not a successful path. So look for those allies and mentors, and take action. As I said, take something from this, whether it changes your behavior, changes your outlook, or things that you observe during your practice. Please do that, okay? And please do not hesitate to reach out to me with any other suggestions and requests for action that we can take. Thank you. And thank you, Ayesha, for this wonderful program.
Thanks, James. So in the words of the Allman Brothers, as sung by my friend and fellow practitioner, Rob Beckelman, let your soul shine, right? This is your moment. This is the time when we step up and we actually, as every single one of our panelists has said, take action. Time to talk is done. So thank you for being with us here. Remember your CLE codes. Remember to submit your CLE forms to SAM before July 2nd. And have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.